jump into the Sunday school lesson here. And I don't think it's going to be super long, but I'll see how much I can cover here. Should be able to cover the whole book. It's kind of going to be real quick. So Daniel chapter 1. In the third year of the reign of King Jehoiakim, king of Judah, Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, came to Jerusalem and besieged it. And the Lord gave Jehoiakim, king of Judah, into his hand, with some of the vassals of the house of God, and brought them to the land of Shinar, in the house of his God, and placed the vassals in the treasury of his God. Then the king commanded Ashpenaz, the chief eunuch, to bring some of the people of Israel, both of the royal family and of the nobility, youths without blemish, of good appearance, and skillful in all wisdom, endowed with knowledge, understanding, learning, and competence, to stand in the king's palace, and to teach them the literature and language of the Chaldeans. The king assigned them a daily portion of the food that the king ate, and of the wine that he drank. They were to be educated for 3 years, and at the end of that time they were to stand before the king. Among these were Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, the tribe of Judah. And the chief of the eunuchs gave them names. Daniel he called Belteshazzar, Hananiah he called Shadrach, Mishael he called Meshach, and Azariah he called Abednego. But Daniel resolved that he would not defile himself with the king's food or with the wine that he drank. Therefore he asked the chief of the eunuchs to allow him not to defile himself. And God gave Daniel favor and compassion in the sight of the chief of the eunuchs. And the chief of the eunuchs said to Daniel, I fear my lord the king, who assigned your food and your drink, for why should he see that you were not in worse condition than the youths who are of your own age? So you would endanger my head with the king. Then Daniel said to the servant, whom the chief of the eunuchs had assigned over Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, test your servants for 10 days. Let us be given vegetables to eat and water to drink. Then let our appearance and the king's appearance of the youths who eat the king's food be observed by you, and deal with your servants according to what you see. So he listened to them in this matter and tested them for 10 days. At the end of the 10 days it was seen that they were better in appearance and fatter in flesh than all the youths who ate the king's food. So the steward took away their food and the wine that they were to drink, and gave them vegetables. As for the 4 youths, God gave them learning and skill in all literature and wisdom, and Daniel the understanding in all visions and dreams. At the end of the time, when the king had commanded that they should be brought in, the chief of the eunuchs brought them before Nebuchadnezzar, and the king spoke with them, and among all them none was found like Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. Therefore they stood before the king, and with every matter of wisdom and understanding about which the king inquired them, he found them 10 times better than all the magicians and the enchanters that were in all his kingdom. And Daniel was there until the 1st year of King Cyrus. So in the first chapter here we see that Judah was defeated by the Babylonians, by King Nebuchadnezzar. That Nebuchadnezzar burnt the temple, and he took the furnishings to Babylon as treasure. At this time they figured Daniel was about 15 or 16 years old, and that would have been about 605 BC. So I've always thought it's interesting that they changed their names, and I can't remember where I seen this at, but each one of the 4 young men were given names of the Babylonians. So Daniel, which means God is my judge, his name was changed to Belteshazzar. So that means in Babylonian, he's named after the god Bel, which is also would be the Canaanite god Baal. So there's so often the gods of ancient times were kind of universal through the different cultures, but they just had different names. So he was named after Marduk or Bel, the chief god of the Babylonians, and the Belteshazzar means Bel protect his life. And the reason I always thought this was kind of interesting is like when Leah and I were ready to have children, we took it upon ourselves. We decided that we would name all of our kids that would be named out of people from the Bible. And it's a lot easier to find boy names than girls, and we had to be blessed with 3 girls. So that's why we ended up with Esther, Julia, Judah, and Abigail. And I just thought it would be good to name them Bible names. None of them are family names or anything like that. Also, so Hananiah, one of the first of Daniel's friends, his name means the Lord shows grace. And his name was changed to Shadrach, which means he was named after the moon god Aku, which means command of Aku. Mishael, which in Hebrew means who is like God, was changed to Meshach. And Meshach is also named after Aku, and it was who is as Aku is. Then Azariah, which in Hebrew means the Lord is my help, was changed to Abednego, and that means servant of Nebo. And Nebo was the patron god of art and writing, and he was a god of vegetables also, or vegetation, I mean. So I just thought it was interesting that they changed their names, and we always remember Daniel as Daniel, but the other 3, I think until last night, I knew they were Hebrew names, but I would have butchered them if I would have even got them right. And we seem to know their Babylonian names a lot better than their Hebrew names. And I wonder if that should be actually changed, where we would know their Hebrew names more than the Babylonian names. Because I'm sure when we see them in heaven, we're not going to call them Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego because they're named after a false god. They probably did. Right. And it's a way to remove them from the Hebrew culture and try to integrate them into the Babylonian culture, too. So, just like you see in any type of takeover, they try to change the history a little bit and twist it. So as we move on, I'm not going to probably be reading full chapters or anything anymore, but Nebuchadnezzar ends up having a dream in chapter 2, and he has a dream of a huge statue. And Daniel interprets this dream for Nebuchadnezzar. And the funny thing is, if you notice, the king has this dream and it disturbs him a lot. And he comes and he says, well, I don't know the dream. You tell me, to the magicians in the land. And the magicians are like, well, how are we supposed to interpret a dream if we don't know what it means? Or what the dream is, really. So then Daniel was able to come forward and tell the king what the dream was and also interpret it. And that's the one, this first dream that we see here in Daniel is a statue of the gold head, the silver chest and arms, bronze belly and thighs, the iron legs, and then you have the iron and clay feet. And this is all a prophetic dream where the gold head represents Babylon. The silver chest and arms represent the Mede and Persian Empire, which is to take over the Babylonians. Then you have the bronze, which would be the Greeks under Alexander the Great. The iron legs would be the Roman Empire, and the iron and clay is believed to be the Antichrist kingdom in the 7-year tribulation. So we have 4 of those 5 have been fulfilled already. Then we move to chapter 3. You have the golden image that the king places up before, and they believe that this golden image is about 90 to 100 feet tall. It probably has a base under it, so it's not all just a person from the ground up. It has a base of so high, and then you're going to have the golden image of the king on top of it. And in this one, Daniel is not present in chapter 3. You have his three friends, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, and they're the only 3 that don't bow down to the image when they're commanded to. So their fate is to be thrown into the fiery furnace. So they're tossed alive into this fiery furnace, but it doesn't kill them. And you also have the appearance of what appears to be, which is most likely the incarnate Jesus Christ in their midst. So there's 4 people. When they come out, they're fine, and because they've taken the punishment and they've survived, it's like they're forgiven by the king. So you have the fiery furnace. Then chapter 4, you have an interpreting of a tree dream, which Nebuchadnezzar has, and it's this big, beautiful tree. It has birds on the birds land in it. It produces great fruit. There's animals underneath it, and then it is chopped down. The tree is chopped down. It's destroyed by an angel, and then you have a stump left, and the stump is girded with iron and bronze. So the king doesn't understand this dream. Daniel interprets this second dream now. So the second dream is a dream that the king is the tree. So he'll be taken down, but he'll still have a remnant there. So that stump will still be there. And he tells the king that you'll be brought low for 7 years. And then after that 7 years, the stump that's there represents his restoration. So what happens to the king? The king looks over his empire and says, look, this is all mine. And he's super proud of what he has. And he believes himself to be almost a god or a god. And sure enough, God strikes him down. He becomes like a wild man, a beast. He becomes insane. His hair grows long. He ends up going out in the fields and he just eats like an animal out in the field. And then after 7 years, he's restored, just like the dream says. And after his restoration, Nebuchadnezzar praises Daniel's God. I personally believe that Nebuchadnezzar will see him in heaven, because I think he shows a faith in the God of the Bible as the one true God. Then we move on to chapter 5. We have an interpretation of the handwriting on the wall. So this is Belshazzar. So Nebuchadnezzar is gone. King Belshazzar, the Medes and the Persians are outside the walls of the Babylon. And Belshazzar has a huge feast. And he invites everybody to come and feast with him. And at this feast, he ends up bringing in the golden instruments from the temple. So they've been in Babylon for like 60 years or so at this point. So they've had these instruments from the temple there. And he brings them in, and he essentially desecrates them. And then a hand appears, which is really fingers, and it writes Mene, Mene, Tekel, Parsin on the wall. And then Daniel interprets that dream and lets the king know that his kingdom will be cut off from him that night. He's been weighed in the balances, he's been fallen short, and his kingdom will be taken away. And that very night, the Persians used a dam to block up the river, and then they were able to walk under the wall and take the city. It's really interesting because those rivers are quite large, but there's many like estuaries and channels for them. So to block the river must have been quite the feat at that time. Let's see. We move on to chapter 6. Then we have Daniel in the lion's den. So the Persians are king at this. Or Persians are the kingdom at this time. Daniel's still faithful. We don't hear about his friends anymore. He's about 80 years old at this point. Some of the other rulers in the country of the Persians come, and they talk the king into signing a decree that they can only worship the king for the next 30 days. And they know that this is going to be Daniel's downfall because they could find no fault in him. And it's interesting to see that Daniel was actually carried as a ruler from one kingdom to the next. And then it has to be because he is faithful to God. He is an honorable and trustworthy person, and they're able to know that Daniel won't betray him, that he's honest with the king's dealings. He probably doesn't cheat the king. So there's Daniel in a situation where he's not allowed to worship God. So he ends up worshiping God anyway. So he defies the king's edict. They catch him doing that. And the king is distraught because he realizes that he's been caught in a trap by these other rulers. So their law is their law, and you can't break the law. Even the king can't break the law. So Daniel is taken and he's brought to the lion's den, and he's cast into the lion's den. And so for the whole night, the king can't sleep. He doesn't eat food. He's worried that Daniel is going to be killed inside this lion's den. And in the morning, he runs down there, and he cries in, Daniel, has your God protected you? Or Daniel, are you alive? And Daniel replies that the Lord has protected me. So they pull him up out of the lion's den, and he's restored to his position. And then all those that plotted against Daniel, it's interesting, all of those that were plotted against Daniel, and their wives and their children were cast into the lion's den instead. And it makes it clear that none of them make it out alive. So if we move on to chapter 7, we'll see a vision of the four beasts. And the four beasts are four kingdoms. So now we're getting into, from 7 on to the end is prophecy of Daniel in the book. And the four beasts are four kingdoms. You have the first one, which is a lion with wings of an eagle. And that one represents Babylon. The second one is a bear with 3 ribs in its mouth. And that represents the Medes and the Persians that followed Babylon. The leopard with 4 wings is the Greeks. And then the final one is the beast with which is the Roman Empire, but also has the 10 horns and the little horn. And the little horn is interpreted as the Antichrist. Let's see. So Daniel discusses those in chapter 8. Then we go on to chapter 9. I'm sorry, chapter 8 would be I was wrong on that. 7 was the prophecy of the beast. 8 is the vision of the ram and the he-goat. The ram, it gives at the end, it gives the interpretation that Gabriel, let's see, I'm on 8. Here we are. This is Belshazzar, appeared to King, and this one is the one, I'm trying to figure this one out right now, sorry. The ram and the goat are interpreted as the kingdom of Alexander the Great, and then I lost my place here. And then following Alexander the Great. Chapter 9 is the 70 weeks appointed by Israel. So this is where we have the prophetic calendar of Israel. And it's interesting to see that Gabriel, the angel Gabriel, brings Daniel the interpretation of this dream, And it's 60, what we can see from it, it goes into great detail of different things that happened in the past, but also gives us one thing in the future. And we have 69 weeks. We're leading up to the Jesus coming in the New Testament, and then the 70th week is yet to be fulfilled, and that would be the 7-year tribulation. So we already have a foreshadowing of the tribulation in the end times. And then we go to the chapters 10, 11, and 12 are a vision of Israel's future. It talks a lot about what happens as far as different kings and how things are taken over in the future with Persia and Greece. You have it talks about all these kings of the south and north, so it gets into a lot of kind of minutia and detail as far as things are to happen in the next few hundred years. And then finally, chapter 12 goes into the Great Tribulation. And chapter 12 is interesting because it's a short one, and it talks about the days of the tribulation. And this is where we get the time, times, and half a time for the 7-year tribulation. And it also lays out the couple different periods of time by days. So that's how we get the full 7 years. You have 360 days in a year in the Jewish calendar, and not the 365 like we do today. You have 3 different dates at the very end, the last couple verses. You have 3 different times given. You have the 1260, 1290, and 1335. So you have the full tribulation lasting 7 years. And my understanding on the difference of the times is you have different endpoints that each one is going to. So the 1260 and 1290 are pointing to 2 specific different endpoints, even though they have the first start point. So it's not a contradiction that there's 2 different numbers. And then I believe that the last one, the 1335, is actually leading to the time from the beginning to the judgment. That's why it's giving you 45 days more than the 1290. It's leading to when actually the Lord, when Jesus is back on earth, this is after the tribulation, the beginning of the millennium, and the 1335 leads into the judgment at that point where the world is judged. So there we have the overview of Daniel. It's interesting to see that we might actually be seeing some of that end times prophecy playing out right now as far as what's going on in Israel, and that the Lord has a plan for what's going to happen here. He knows the end before the beginning, and that we have really nothing to worry about as long as we're held in His hand. So I'm hoping in the future to kind of delve into this more, so I kind of just wanted to give a pretty quick overview. And if I can, like I said later, at one point we're going to go into each of these chapters in depth, and we'll go over what each one means and try to give you a better understanding of the book of Daniel. So I guess at this time we'll pray and be dismissed. Heavenly Father, we thank you for this day, Lord. I thank you that we are able to come together and learn about your word. I pray that you would just watch over all those in attendance here, Lord. I pray that you would bless the service to come. Give each one of us a good day. I pray that we would spread the gospel here in the Landsberg area, that we would be a witness to the community. In Jesus' name.